I switched from a self-funded searcher to a traditional path, and I find that it's helpful to manage conversations with advisors, that I have a group of investors who have backed me and are actively looking to acquire something in the UK versus just me on my own.
Welcome to Season 2 of the Found and Funded podcast, a podcast for searchers by search experts where we explore the route to business ownership without having that $1 million idea. I'm your host, Carl Goldberg, CEO at Gerald Edelman and founder of the ETA Awards. Let's get into it.
Many times you are met with silence from the room. Hopefully not.
I know that. Every joke I make.
Any business owners listening, please reach out to me.
That would be why you don't have a driver's license. Driving on the wrong side of the road.
You have a wide... No, I'm the podcast.
You're the host. You are the host. Yeah. Today, we've got Allison Stuckless, founder and managing partner of Vericor Capital, a traditional search fund in the UK. Allison, great to have you on. It'd be great if you could just do an introduction, first of all, to yourself and maybe a little bit about your background.
Sure, yes. And thank you for having me on, Carl. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah.
So I'm Allie Stuckless. 2 months ago, I launched a traditional search fund in the UK. So I've raised a small pool of capital to sponsor the search phase of finding one existing business to buy and operate in the UK. Very excited to be in this phase. It was an 18-month-long journey, and prior to the search journey, I was a private banker at JP Morgan, where I worked for about a decade. So
great.
And I've been in the UK for 4 years.
Excellent. Really looking forward to getting into some of that. So I suppose you were at JP Morgan, right?
Yes.
For a long time. Was that in London or was that in the States?
It was in the States. So I was there, from 2 internships in college, and I found my way to the Mexico team in the private bank. So I was a private banker in Mexico for 6 years. Wow. Out of Miami. So I moved from New York to Miami and covered Mexico. It was quite an international stint as a 25-year-old blonde woman traveling to rural areas and managing portfolios, and it was a fantastic experience. So yeah, really formative, and learning. Most of the investments were related to the public markets, and oftentimes in pesos, Mexican pesos.
Oh, right.
So lots of cross-currency transactions and things like that. So.
Yeah, interesting things like derivatives and swaps and whatever.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, fun. Okay, and so you did that for 10, 11 years, and then decided to leave. And what was it that kind of drove that decision?
So I never expected to stay for so long. Is the answer. I joined as an intern. I studied policy in university, and I never expected to work in finance, but always was drawn to international careers. I lived in Spain when I was in high school, Argentina as well. So once I found the Mexico route and Latin America route, it spoke to more of a personal interest. But after the pandemic, I just decided that it was time to move on and expand my horizons. So I quit without a plan and pursued stand-up comedy, actually, and ended up in London. So I've been here ever since.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And so you left. You didn't know what you were going to do. You came to London. Why London?
The weather.
Excellent.
Yeah.
From Miami.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I came here to do stand-up comedy, actually, and try my hand at being a professional comedian. And in that process, I loved the British sense of humor, and the scene is thriving here. So I really loved it. And in that process, I fell in love with the UK. So I got a job that sponsored my visa. I was sucked back into the world of finance and realized that I do like business a lot and want to be in it. And so yes, it's a continuation of building roots here in the UK. So that's why, yeah.
Excellent. So you came for the comedy. I think we'll get into that a little bit later. I know that you obviously you worked as well, as you say, but also did an MBA. So what was the order of that?
Yes. So I knew I was coming to the UK, waiting for my visa, and I decided that, I had an insight that I could go back to get my MBA, and there are amazing universities in the UK, like Oxford and Cambridge, and all of these, this educational hub. So I decided to do an executive MBA alongside my work, and go with the intention of doing something entrepreneurial afterwards. So I did it at Oxford, and I ended up moving to Oxford full time to get the full student experience as a 32-year-old woman next to a bunch of 18-year-olds. But it was a great experience. I loved Oxford, and I learned so much. So it doesn't matter, how old you are when you go back to school. But it was great. Yeah.
No. And so while you were doing your MBA, it was an executive MBA. You were working. Is that your time working? Your first experience in the search world?
Yes. So in doing the executive MBA, I came across search through a friend who acquired a window business here. Shout out to Paul Quirk. We know him well.
Big up the Buy and Build podcast.
The Accelerator. Yeah, lots of lots of things. He introduced me to search, and I saw him acquire this window business or home installation business, and it was very inspiring. So I was interested in exploring that route myself, and there was a class at Oxford taught by Jan Simon. So I connected with him, and he invited me to join his fund. So I worked for his fund for a year as an investment director. It's called Van Zeo. Shout out to Van Zeo.
Shout out to Van Zeo. Big up Jan Simon.
They're a fantastic group of investors. So I learned so much in that year. And an important kind of personal exploration was realizing that I had been on the investor side from JP Morgan and Van Zeo, but I very much wanted to be a searcher. So that experience was clear that I wanted to be on the other side of the table.
So, Ali, your time at Van Zeo would have put you in a unique position, really, where actually you've been on the investment side. I mean, obviously your background at JP Morgan, I'm sure lots of that would also be relevant. But in particular, having been in probably one of the most renowned, investment funds in this space globally, as an investment director, must have put you in a very interesting position to then go off and raise your own search fund. Could you maybe talk to that point a little bit?
Sure. So yes, it was a very privileged position, especially because they have investments all over the world. And so I had a window into how the search community and small business environment kind of operates in different corners of the world. And as I was, exploring working at Van Zeo, it was just fantastic learning experience, and developing pattern recognition and what the strongest businesses look like and what the challenges were, the common challenges that searchers face. So it was a fantastic learning experience.
And okay, great. And so what have you experienced now being on the other side of the fence as a searcher that is actually different when you're in it than it seems to be on the other side?
Sure. So maybe taking a step back on when I decided to join or to become a searcher, maybe might be helpful. So I knew early on that I wanted to be a searcher, and explored the UK market as a self-funded searcher in my spare time on a very small basis. I looked at very small companies and just reached out to them on Instagram or through my personal network, and just very proprietary. And that testing of the UK market was really important to my own exploration, and I loved it. So I realized it's really fun. And that's the experience that I have having launched a traditional fund now. Is it's really inspiring to work with searchers as an investor. They're very inspiring individuals, very motivated. But now I get to speak with CEOs and entrepreneurs who have done incredible things with their businesses and their lives, and learning about all these industries, directly from these leaders. So I'm having a lot of fun in this phase. And the investor role was fantastic and very privileged, but I feel even more so as a searcher.
Yeah. So it was everything you thought it would be. And as you say, you tested it beforehand, right?
Yeah, and I switched from a self-funded searcher to a traditional path, and I find that it's helpful to manage conversations with advisors, that I have a group of investors who have backed me and are actively looking to acquire something in the UK versus just me on my own. And yes, there are of course, challenges and things I didn't expect, but I'm generally very happy to be on this side. So,
and actually, that's an interesting point you make there about the decision to be self-funded versus traditional. There's lots of good reasons. I would say I'm very much converted to the traditional model nowadays, but there are arguments for both, definitely. But I guess not only the credibility when it comes to traditional, being able to say, look, I've got this group of investors, that they have an intention to follow on and back the acquisition, and I suppose they've proven that by investing in the search capital. But then, I suppose you've also got the coaching aspect. So, this concept of the horse, the jockey and the trainer, right? Where, the experienced investors will effectively rally around and help and guide and coach the searcher. And so have you got a kind of a group of what I lovingly call the search fund mafia, the old school group of investors in your cap table?
I do. So I have 14 investors, and I would say it's a very diverse group. Lots of institutional names that you might recognize, also family offices and former entrepreneurs and searchers. And also I have one person who has no experience investing in search funds, but I just really liked him and connected very deeply with him as an entrepreneur. So it's very diverse. And I speak with them. So I'm just almost 3 months in, and I purposely kind of filled gaps of where my weaknesses are. So I've never done deep financial analyses before on small businesses and accounting. And I've worked with a number of my investors in the past month or so on a deal where that experience was really valuable to work with them and hear their advice on things that I've missed. So I'm really happy to have the group of investors that I do. So
yeah, that's great. It's good to hear that the model does still work, right? And because you do, I suppose, as a traditional searcher, you do possibly give up a little more of the equity compared to the self-funded route, and so I guess you want to make sure you're making the most of what you get in return, right? And using the experience and everything else. Yes,
and my biggest fear is acquiring the wrong business. So I felt that having a great group of investors behind me would mitigate the risk of buying the wrong business and increase the chances of buying the right one. So hopefully definitely. That plays out.
Yeah, I think it's very widely accepted that buying the wrong business is far worse than not buying a business at all.
Yes.
So yeah, definitely. And so what is the plan? What are you looking for? Have you got an industry focus? What's the size range? Is there a geographical focus that you're thinking about? I mean, you're living in London now.
Yes, I am. Anywhere in the UK. So I am looking for a single business. Any business owners listening, please reach out to me. Between 1 and 7 million EBITDA. And my thesis is something called a life cycle services thesis. So anything that pertains to the human life cycle from birth to death. So I'm looking at fertility clinics, education, at something in like longevity and hormone therapies related search businesses, not drug companies because they don't fit the criteria, but retirement and funerals. So anything that supports the human life cycle is my primary focus, but it's also a very wide mandate. So I've spent a lot of time in the past couple of months looking at housing materials and construction for some reason, because that's where I have found opportunities in the past month. So it can vary. I'm very open to anywhere in the UK. I draw a line at Middlesbrough, I think. And I actively would like to move to the north, to Manchester in that area.
You really are here for the weather.
I know.
Yeah.
People are very nice up north. So they're nice everywhere. But I'm happy to be anywhere. I'm okay to move to Preston even.
Wow. Yeah. Gosh. You are committed. Interestingly, there's a searcher I know in the UK who I think kind of drew me in to kind of forming a good relationship with him when I saw in his PPM that it said he's interested in buying a company printing cash in the middle of nowhere, e.g. Wales. And I thought, yeah, he's looking at North Wales. You know, there are some really remote areas that have got some really good, you know, industry there. And so I think having that broad geographical outlook is important, because, you know, you're in the southeast. I don't know the stats and what the proportion of searches in the UK are in the southeast, but I imagine a lot of them are. And I think I'm not completely certain of this, but my instinct is that the age of searchers tends to be increasing slightly. So actually I find a lot more of them have got families and things, and so they're probably less willing to move. So having that flexibility is actually, I think, will set you in good stead.
Yeah, I'm also looking at a business in Wales, actually.
Are you?
Yeah. My biggest drawback is I don't have a driver's license. So in the UK, I drive on the other side of the road, so I need to get used to that, I think.
Yeah, that would be why you don't have a driver's license. Drive on the wrong side of the road. Yes, it's true, because somewhere remote like that, you are going to need to drive.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah.
I'll get on it, so.
Yeah, that's on the list. Okay, and I suppose then, you know, speaking of geography, you moved here without a plan from New York, Miami, New York, London, Oxford, London, maybe Manchester or Wales.
Yeah.
But it was only 4 years ago.
Yes.
And then you decided to do your search here.
Yes.
Despite having seen searches around the world during your time kind of investing in search, it's a long-term commitment. It's a very long-term thing. You know, you're in until you're done, really, and that could be 10, 15 years. What was the process for making that decision? Was it an easy one to make after being here, or?
That was the hardest decision I've made in the whole process. You know, I knew I wanted to be a searcher. I knew I explored the traditional versus self-funded route, and that had different consequences, but that was a relatively easy decision for me. But where to do it was very, very important. And I tested the UK market as a self-funded searcher, as I mentioned, and I really enjoyed the traction that I had as a searcher in the UK market, especially as a foreigner. There are many foreigners who have acquired businesses here in the UK, which is very encouraging for me. But on a personal level, I'm from the US. I went back to the US a couple of years ago and realized they have very favorable financing schemes like the SBA loan, and there's so many more opportunities. The returns are higher in the US, but I realized the only reason I would go back to the US is to chase a higher return. And meanwhile, I was very happy in the UK, so I just decided to stay where I was happiest and take a bet that I would perform best where I'm happiest, and so that's why I decided to stay. Excellent. And I think it doesn't mean that it's not possible to do something here and do well here. I think the tax rates are a bit higher here for entrepreneurs, but that's okay. You know, I think, it will.
There'll be so much more to be taxed, it won't matter. I think it's a very sensible decision. I mean, it shows maturity, I think, to realize that the returns potentially are higher elsewhere, but actually you're going to be happier somewhere else. It's obviously always an unknown. You know, you don't know. But you know, having been here for 4 years, seen the environment, seen the market, I think it's a sensible decision. I'm actually very keen on the UK market. I mean, despite being you know, my entire livelihood is kind of leveraged from the SME space in the UK, right? Because principally that's our client base at Gerald Edelman. But I, you know, I think there's still huge opportunities, particularly in the succession acquisitions, and in growth. You know, I think there's still kind of roll-up opportunities. You know, there's opportunities for organic growth in these succession businesses, these retirement sales. I think it's a good shout.
You tipped me, and yes, you're very busy. You have lots of transactions, and you've tipped me off to a strategy that I've followed that I maybe shouldn't share on a podcast so openly, but
You can remind me later.
the looking at the AIM exchange, and I've done a lot of digging and have met with directors of AIM and have become very passionate about the AIM exchange that I didn't know about a year and a half ago. So it has its challenges as well, but I think there are many avenues in the UK market that are not available in other smaller markets.
Yes. Yeah, there's definitely some opportunities there. It's logistically challenging, I think, to make the most of them. But the first person to do it will, I imagine, do very well.
Yeah.
And once you've done it once, it's pretty easy to do it again.
Or the way I'm thinking about it is to look where others aren't looking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of one of the points I was trying to make is I think there are still places that people aren't looking. I don't know what they are.
Yeah.
But people come to me and they're like, I'm going to do this. And I'm like, that's a really good idea, actually, well done. So I think there are some unexploited opportunities out there. So then I think just to touch on something that you mentioned at the beginning, which is the comedy, and you moved to the UK to pursue that. But that was kind of following an 11-year stint at JP Morgan. Like, how would you have time to be a banker at JP Morgan, probably with some travel and everything else, and start to work on comedy as well?
Yes, I mean, I think it's very important to have hobbies, and it was the best outlet, and it continues to be a great outlet for having such a serious job. To just kind of have something creative, and it makes you perform better at your serious job. And so I found that to be the case, and I just loved it. And I've done it here in the UK. I love doing comedy here. My niche is Spanish comedy, so I do it in Spanish, and have done probably a dozen shows here in the UK.
Wow. In Spanish?
In Spanish. And big shows.
That is niche, isn't it? Spanish, an American doing Spanish comedy in the UK.
Yes, it's you wouldn't expect 300 people to go to a Spanish show in Brighton.
Yeah.
But they exist, and the community is thriving. And so for me, that's one of the reasons why I love the UK so much, is because it is really diverse. You wouldn't think these environments exist, but when you unpack, there's a lot there. So I really enjoy doing comedy here.
And so I suppose, is there any parallels you can draw between doing comedy and running a search fund?
Yes, definitely. So one thing you need to be very comfortable with as a comedian is rejection. So you perform, a joke 100 times, and you're constantly refining it. And many times you are met with silence from the room. Hopefully not.
I know that. Every joke I make.
It happens often, and the British crowds are tough sometimes. So you only get laughs if you really deserve it. And I think my level of acceptance of rejection is exceptionally high, which is helpful for when you're, sending 300 emails and getting rejections as a searcher, and certainly through the fundraising process as well. There was rejection there, no surprise.
Yeah.
And I think it's very helpful to have that comedy experience, and it's also a lot of business owners I'm finding like comedy, so talking about it. And
yeah, I think there's some really, really interesting points there, actually, and I've got a couple of things that I'd like to pick up on. One is, and I think it'd be worth getting into the proprietary versus brokered outreach in a moment, but the best searches that I've seen, mostly in the proprietary side, to get nice deals done that are off market, or even in a competitive process where maybe they're under bidder but still manage to get the deal done, is where they've built a really good connection with the seller. And you have got different sellers, there's different motivations. Some just want the biggest number, others are less concerned and want to feel as though their baby that they've built over the years is going to go into the right hands. And I think, having that connection, everyone likes a laugh, right? And being able to be funny or make someone laugh, it really helps to establish that connection with people. And I think it probably will put you in good stead to develop those relationships and hopefully win in those processes. What's your mix between proprietary and brokered outreach?
It's half and half. Yeah.
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 Okay.
And I would just say that Yeah, the humor is part of it, but yeah, the connection and the relationships part of the search journey, and just my success as a future CEO will be building those relationships with the seller and making sure that we kind of go forward together. And yeah, I think I underestimated the importance of relationships, even though I knew it was clearly very important, but even more so as I'm actively searching.
Yeah, it's one of those things that people say, your relationship, but actually, I've seen it, and if you look and think, how do the best people who are buying things at 3x, how do they get those deals? And it's just because they're likable. It's not just because they're likable, it's because they're likable, they're smart, they're trustworthy, they can put a good deal together and be clever about it. But without the likability, they wouldn't even get in the door. So it's a very interesting point. Just on the point about rejection as well, I think actually it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on whether you were naturally a resilient person, which is what, and funny, which is what kind of gave you the confidence to try the comedy, or you were kind of naturally a comedian and so had to build up that resilience in order to be able to kind of do your craft.
I would say probably resilience before being naturally funny. I'm actually not naturally funny and have had to work very hard at it. And I enjoy the kind of creative process of thinking something is funny in my head and maybe trying it out and then refining it. And, it's a craft, so you're constantly tweaking it. And the performance aspect is just, whether it does well or not, I'm always happy to do it and proud to do it. So it's much better, obviously, if it goes well. But yeah.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
I feel like perhaps some of this rejection has come from Middlesbrough.
Yeah.
Given your list of places that you refuse to go back to. Preston, not so bad. Middlesbrough, not great. Is that right?
That's right. I once did a show to 450 people in Middlesbrough and got booed off stage.
Really?
Yes. And it was a comedy competition, and you had up to 5 minutes and they can boo you off stage. And there were 3 layers of people, and I was a minute in, and the place was actually in Stockton-on-Tees.
Right.
And I said, "Hello, Middlesbrough." And I was a goner.
Straight out.
Yes. But I lasted 3 minutes.
Okay.
And felt, it was public humiliation of getting booed off stage by so many people.
But in a competition where that's the game.
That
right?
is the
You
game.
get booed off
And oddly, I felt like walking off stage, I felt like a champion that I had made it.
3 minutes before they booed you off. Yeah.
Yes.
So I assume only one person doesn't ultimately get booed off stage and they're the winner.
Yeah, exactly.
So you could be second and have been booed off stage.
Well, yes. And why it was a positive experience for me was I never gave up. So there were moments where, of course, I knew all of this was happening, this terror, basically. 3 layers of people just wanting me to fail. And then fighting and truly digging deep to continue and not give up. And I could have easily walked off stage, but I was really happy with that kind of strength. So for sure, it helps me. And if a seller rejects me or doesn't get back to me, like I just think about Middlesbrough.
Yeah,
and,
could be worse. Yeah, exactly. They're not kind of publicly booing you.
And apparently I'm not the only one who thinks Middlesbrough is a tough crowd.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Can I ask you questions?
You can.
Okay. I would love to know your thoughts on the UK market and what you're seeing in the market and what stands out to you as a strong business.
Oh, that's a good question. I wasn't expecting to be questioned, but funnily enough, I was in a session the other day with a group of CEOs, and kind of a theme seemed to be coming up about the economy and how things are looking a little bit gloomy. And naturally, they turned to me because I work with lots of different businesses and said, "What are you seeing, Carl? You must be seeing the same." Not really. Actually, things seem okay. And I think there's kind of the sentiment is not great, but actually the numbers are okay, right? So we don't really see any major issues. And then when it comes to transactions, it's been incredibly busy, probably for the last 2.5 years maybe, just a continuous flow of transactions. I think, when you look at the numbers and the stats, there are so many businesses that are ripe for a succession acquisition. And I appreciate that, search doesn't have to be a succession acquisition, but of course we know that they are good ones to do because you've got inbuilt succession as part of the model. And I think because of that, people are transactions are going to continue to happen. I think if we do get some economic uncertainty or increased economic uncertainty and perhaps a sustained recession, given that we've just had COVID not so many years ago, I think it's just going to drive more of these business owners to say, right, I've had enough, I want out.
I've heard that. Yeah.
There may be some challenges around valuation at that time because, you've got, are the historical sustained earnings going to be what's maintainable into the future? Question. But I think that can be dealt with through earnouts and deferred payments and perhaps in the multiples. So I think there will be opportunities if you think about the exit horizon of a search acquisition. It's certainly long enough to ride out the normal kind of peaks and troughs of economic cycles. So perhaps buying when economic conditions aren't as favourable as they might be is not such a bad thing. I've seen multiples going up a little bit recently, which is interesting. It's perhaps the opposite of what you may expect. But yeah, overall things seem to be fairly buoyant in the M&A space.
That's good to know. And obviously you have a wide, now I'm the podcast.
You're the host. You are the host. Yeah.
You see a wide range of searchers and folks coming to you with deals that haven't closed yet. And many of them don't close, or at least some of them. What would you say is the difference between a deal that closes and something that falls through?
I was thinking about this the other day. It's one of those things that kind of just popped into my head. I think I was in the shower. I was thinking, actually,
shout out to the shower.
Shout out to the shower. Big up the shower crew. We don't see that many that fall over. Actually, it does happen. It does happen. But why does it happen? Normally, trading one way or the other. Sometimes it can be trading's massively improved, and it's just difficult. Seller thinks, hang on a minute, I don't want to sell at this price. More often than not, the transaction gets in the way of day-to-day business ops, and perhaps there's a slight fall off. Sometimes funding can be an issue. So, actually filling equity gaps if they arise. More often that would probably happen in a self-funded deal. But it naturally does happen. There's, the stats are going to show that a percentage of deals do fall through. Sometimes they come back. Sometimes they go on hold indefinitely and the searcher finds something else and kind of forgets all about it. But, most of them, when they get to the kind of DD stage, when you're in exclusive heads of terms, unless there is a change or a funding problem, the deal tends to go through. Because by that point, yes, we're doing DD and we're going to do a much deeper dive than the searcher has done, but hopefully it's confirmatory as opposed to identifying any big news at that point. Again, that does happen, but it's not that often that happens. So we do find mostly that things do go through. Can I come back to asking you some questions?
I've really enjoyed this hosting gig. Can I ask one more?
Go on.
I know that oftentimes deals fall through because searchers don't manage seller expectations well, and it's their first time going through this. I have, this will be my first time acquiring a company. Do you have any advice on managing expectations for the process? You have a great view into it.
I think, there's a couple of points there that are important. I think it depends, first of all, whether it's brokered or it's proprietary, right? If it's brokered, is it brokered or have they got a proper sell-side M&A advisor?
Yes.
If they've got a proper sell-side M&A advisor, probably they've got a realistic expectation of what they're going to be able to achieve. Now, obviously, you have to remember that advisor is going to be trying to get as much as they can for their client. That's their job. But they'll be reasonable. They want to get a deal done. That's their job. It is to realize a fair amount for their client. If it's a broker, the broker's probably told them they're going to get 74 times some ridiculously adjusted EBITDA number with no management salaries in there, and maybe slight exaggeration, but they will probably have an overinflated idea of what their business is worth. So you're always kind of starting there at a point where you know there is a gap. And what I often see in these situations is that you can go and tell them, look, actually it's not worth 74 times, it's worth 3.5 times. And they're not going to believe you. And it will take 15 people like you to tell them the same. And then they'll realize, hang on a minute, maybe that's the case. And so, you know, I actually have the stats for this, but I would be quite confident that brokered deals will take longer. You know, like these kind of brokered, non-properly advised, right? So just brokers, not advisors, because there's just this shift that they have to reconcile that actually they're not going to get what they thought they were going to get. On the proprietary side, I think you probably have to go into those deals. You know, it can be very exciting when you get a response, right, of an off-market opportunity. You probably have to go into that expecting that at some point they're going to appoint an advisor.
Yeah.
And that advisor will say to them, you need to go to the market because it's unwise to sell your company to someone who's approached you cold, not because they're not a good buyer, but just because, you know, you want a competitive process, right? Rarely, sometimes, but rarely they won't do that. And they will just, you know, you can do a deal. They've already got an idea of what they think it's worth. And as long as you can structure something that gives them, you know, a fair deal, you may be able to get into it. But so I think it depends on the route, and also you have to go into these things thinking that there's going to be an advisor, and ultimately you'll end up paying market. Yeah. Really.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as, you know, there is, but it happens very rarely that you buy a company without any issues under market value, right?
Yeah.
And I have seen deals that have come in, you know, with a sub-3 multiple the following year, but they've got their issues.
Wow. Yeah.
They've got their issues, right? And actually maybe the issues aren't issues, but they're unknowns at least, so there's risk. So are there any books or events or other resources or materials that you would recommend to someone who's interested in search, either doesn't know much about it yet or knows a bit but wants to really have a deep dive?
Yes. So I would say, well, I have some examples here that
it's almost as though you knew I was going to ask.
This may or may not work, but the first book is in my office on my desk, and I didn't have time to bring it this morning, but it's Jan Simon's book,
of course.
Search Fund and Entrepreneurial Acquisitions. Highly recommend. I use it. I looked at it yesterday on something related to river guides, and it's very helpful. I would recommend buying it in physical form.
Yep.
But outside the box, and there are plenty of resources online and primers, and I'm sure people who are listening to this know that, but I brought some other recommendations that I found to be really helpful in my fundraising process. I don't know.
Go on.
Yeah.
Let's visual.
£5 off.
Excellent.
Nate Silver, The Art of Risking Everything. So this is a very famous political statistician in the U.S. who predicts elections, and attempts to, and he is also a professional poker player.
Okay.
And so he follows risk-taking of entrepreneurs and poker players. And so I loved this book, and he defines what a good risk taker does. This book is called Possible by William Ury. He wrote Getting to Yes, the kind of negotiations Bible from the 1980s. And this is his updated version of treating negotiations as more of a relationship than just a one-off transaction. So negotiation is increasingly a part of my role as a searcher. And
Definitely.
So to look at it from a different angle is really helpful, and it's an encouraging book. So I'd recommend these. And then Rick Rubin, if anyone else is an artist, you would know who he is. He's a music producer for Run DMC and lots of artists. And he has a book called The Way of Being, and he's quite prolific. I'm sure the producers here have probably heard of him.
Oh.
Yeah, you got some
Positive.
hands up.
Yeah.
Maybe not related to. Maybe some searchers don't know who he is, but
I don't know who he is.
you should read this book. It's basically like how to unblock creative processes and move forward. So
excellent.
So these are the books. 5 pounds off.
£5 off that one. Commish on these, I imagine have you got a discount code?
Yeah. Actually, I don't know if I should say this, but I met William at a meditation retreat in India.
Oh.
Yes, on the hills in Tiruvannamalai, right after I
you'd
closed.
read it?
No, after I did not read Getting to Yes.
Okay.
And he gave me really wonderful negotiations advice.
Wow.
And then he recommended his book, and I
Amazing.
actually really enjoyed the book. So
That's two of the authors that you have met. Jan Simon.
Oh, yes.
He was at the conference we were at last week, and
Yes.
one of my colleagues, I said, "Oh, that's Jan Simon." He said, "Oh, I've got his book. And they were very excited to see him, starstruck.
Yeah.
So,
and they have the protagonist is a woman of the searcher. I really like that book too.
Yeah.
So, get into as many resources as possible, but don't limit yourself to just business books.
yes.
Yeah.
Got it. Right, Ali. So the final question that we ask everyone is, who has taught you the most on your journey? And it's quite a broad question. You can interpret it how you like. But yeah, be really interested to hear that.
I'd say my mom. I know that's somewhat of a canned answer, but she owned a restaurant when I was very young and transformed an old flour mill into a very modern restaurant and art gallery. Wow. That was open for like 12 years, and I worked there from when I was like 10 years old in the kitchen. And yeah, she took a lot of risks to make that work, and I'm very inspired by her doing that. So early on, giving me responsibility in the kitchen and all that too. So
and entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Excellent. Brilliant. Well,
Shout
Ali,
out to Mom.
big up, Mum. Thank you so much for coming on. It's
thank
been
you for
really
having
great
me.
talking to you. I've really enjoyed it. And we will see you at the ETO Awards.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Found and Funded Pod and LinkedIn at the Found and Funded Podcast, and comment on who you'd like to see us sit down with next. If you have any questions about what we've discussed today, drop me a message and let's have a chat.